Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun decided that he truly was a rare genius. That's right, if they're really unlucky, then I'll fail every single time. Fudge, I'll blow them all to bits. Excitement surging, he continued on with more conjuring attempts. Everyone else in the river-defying sect was enlivened by what they had just seen, and poured all of the power they could into the spell formation, causing the cracks to rapidly repair themselves. Patriarch Dao River and Patriarch Starry River both hesitated, fearful of the sea of fire they had just encountered. Damn that Bai Xiaochun! Chen Hichan gritted his teeth and thought back to the exploding pill furnaces back at the Great Wall. Frowning, he took a step forward, appearing in front of the spell formation shield. Eyes flashing with cold light, he shoved his hand out toward the shield. Bai Zhenchen and Li Shendao joined him, both of them stepping forward to attack the spell formation as well. Patriarch Dao River and Patriarch Starry River immediately felt less nervous and joined in. It only took the briefest of moments for 5 devas to be simultaneously unleashing attacks onto the spell formation shield. Patriarch Spirit Stream's face fell, and the anxiety of the river-defying sect disciples grew. The Blood Ancestor and Bruiser both flew toward the shield and bolstered it with all the power they could. Booms rang out. Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen were all in the mid-diva realm, far beyond compared to the other 2 patriarchs. All 3 of them unleashed attacks that became enormous hands which pressed down onto the shield. The spell formation shuddered, and distorted ripples spread out across it. More cracks opened up, causing numerous river-defying sect disciples to cough up mouthfuls of blood. It was all the spell formation could do to stand up to the attack of 5 devas, and obviously, it would only be able to hold out for a few moments longer before collapsing. In his private chamber, Bai Xiaochun was virtually going mad. He currently had 5 tongues of 16-colored flame and 3 tongues of 17-colored flame, which he unhesitatingly threw out beyond the shield. By careful use of his divine sense, he destabilized all of them, instantly causing them to explode. Massive booms filled the air as a huge sea of flames spread out. Although it couldn't compare to the previous one, it was still shocking. Of course, Chen Hichan and the other devas had been prepared, and were able to evade the attack. HMPH, Chen Hichan snorted, just trying to buy time, huh? Well, let's see how much of that fire you have. He was just about to press another attack when the Blood Ancestor pushed his hands down onto the dire Skybanyan. Bruiser did the same. In fact, all of the spirit beasts in the sect rushed over, using all of their energy to assist in the defense of the sect. Even as the sea of fire faded away, the spell formation shield once again knitted back together. Chen Hichan and the other devas blurred back into motion, yet again attacking the spell formation. However, the spell formation had stabilized greatly, and Bai Xiaochun continued to toss out fireballs. Chen Hichan's rage was mounting, and it was the same with Bai Zhenchen and Li Shendao. That was especially true of Li Shendao, who was shocked to realize that he was actually seeing multicolored flame. For Bai Xiaochun to have accumulated so many types of multicolored flame in his time in the wildlands was shocking to the extreme, and was proving to be a big headache. Damn it, even one of those tongues of multicolored flame could be considered priceless. I can't believe he's being so extravagant. How did this Bai Xiaochun get so much multicolored flame in the wildlands? Not only were the devas shocked, they were being kept away from the spell formation because of the constant explosions. As a result, the river-defying sect's shield continued to grow stronger by the moment. The fact that 5 devas were incapable of blasting through the spell formation shield of a single Middle Reaches sect caused their fury to burn. In his private chamber, Bai Xiaochun was both worried and filled with anticipation. At the moment, he was splitting his concentration between his efforts to conjure 21-colored flame and his attempts to pay attention to the battle outside and toss out multicolored flame. Although he had built up stockpiles of multicolored flame, they didn't run too deep. However, he had no other ways to buy time. He was doing everything possible to conjure his 21-colored flame, and although he was somewhat distracted, he was already working on compressing the flame he was working with. As it shrank down, the numerous colors in the flame flickered madly. Even as Bai Xiaochun held his breath and looked for the additional color, Chen Hichan and the other devas unleashed another round of attacks on the spell formation. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of the river-defying sect cultivators, and many began to list in weakness. The spell formation clearly wouldn't last for much longer. Shouting, Bai Xiaochun threw out 3 tongues of 18-colored flame, and a tongue of 19-colored flame. 18-colored flame was shocking enough to begin with, so when it exploded, the intense heat it generated forced Chen Hichun and the others to back up. Damn it, Bai Xiaochun shouted. How can this guy have so much multicolored flame? Get this spell formation down. Chen Hichun bellowed. Even if he has more multicolored flame, he won't dare to use it inside of his own sect. Break this formation. Li Shendao yelled. Without any hesitation, all three of the devas blasted the spell formation shield, joined by Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Dao River. Braving the intense heat, they closed in and launched powerful divine abilities into the shield. Booms rang out at long last, the shield couldn't hold any longer, and collapsed. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of all the river-defying sect forces, from the low-level disciples all the way up to Patriarch Spirit Stream and Bruiser. As despair filled the hearts of the river-defying sect cultivators, Patriarch Dao River and Patriarch Starry River excitedly advanced into the sect. However, it was in that very moment that Bai Xiaochun found the new color in the sea of fire. He quickly sent his divine sense inside, and successfully completed the 21st color. An air of ultimate supremacy erupted out from the sea of fire, causing the heavens to dim and a wild wind to kick up. The will of the five devas, which had taken over from the will of the heavens, was suddenly driven back as if by a massive hand. Multicolored light erupted out into the night, causing the faces of the devas to fall as they sensed a sudden, intense feeling of deadly crisis. The origin of that crisis was one of the river-defying sect's secluded meditation facilities, which was none other than the location where Bai Xiaochun was conjuring the flame. Although the devas didn't want to fall back, the bright light shining out from the area filled them with such a sense of danger that they had no other choice. Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Dao River were deeply shaken, and immediately began to retreat. It was in that moment that the most profound and maddening energy possible erupted out. Rumble, what is that? What is this Bai Xiaochun doing? This feeling, heavens. It feels like heaven and earth are about to be destroyed. Even as the devas were completely and utterly shaken, something like an enormous net appeared high in the sky. It was impossible to determine what existed on the other side of that net, but Bai Xiaochun could tell that this was the very same world seal that he had seen during the spectacular battle in the wildlands. In his private chamber, Bai Xiaochun panted, and the sweat which popped out on his head instantly transformed into white steam. He was now fully concentrating, completely focused on the sea of fire. Form together, 21 colored flame. RRRRUUUUUUUUUMBLE. As the sea of fire shrank down into his hand, the intense energy caused deafening rumbling sounds to fill the air. Strangely, though, there was no sign of any form of tribulation. The process lasted for the space of a few breaths of time. When the surging energy reached its peak, Bai Xiaochun closed his hand around the sea of fire. Heart-pounding, he took several deep breaths, then slowly opened his fingers. Brilliant light erupted out, causing the sky to vibrate and the lands to quake. There in the middle of his hand, was a 21-colored flame. Heavenly fire. Heavenly multicolored flame could only be conjured by a heavenly necromancer. Whether it was the flame itself, or the heavenly necromancer, both were things of legend. Neither had appeared within the wildlands for countless years, and in fact, not even the formula for 21-colored flame could be found. Besides, Bai Xiaochun only did it with the help of his apprentice and a huge collection of souls. There had also been a chance set of circumstances that led up to a situation where Bai Xiaochun made his attempt without even being completely confident in succeeding. As soon as the 21-colored flame appeared in the open, and the dramatic signs appeared in heaven and earth, Chen Hichun, Li Shendao and Bai Xiaochun gasped in shock. They had lived for a long time, and valued their own lives. Therefore, the sensation of imminent danger gave them no other option than to back away. Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Dao River Court had similar reactions, their eyes bulging and their hearts pounding as they retreated. The despairing river-defying sect disciples saw the bright light, and could feel the pressure radiating out from Bai Xiaochun's secluded meditation facilities, and instantly, their hearts surged with excitement. Patriarch Bai, it's Patriarch Bai, we have hope. With the Patriarch here, who will dare to offend our river-defying sect? Bai Xiaochun was just as excited as all the other cultivators in the sect. As he sat there looking at the tongue of 21-colored flame he had just conjured, he had the strong feeling that the world around him couldn't contain something this powerful. He looked up at the world seal net high above, and suddenly remembered something his apprentice had said, that he suspected 21-colored flame was a limit within the world. This world can only contain 21-colored flame. 22-colored flame is an impossibility. Although it seemed a bit much to take in, he finally understood. Back in the trial by fire in the labyrinth, he had seen 21-colored flame. However, that had been an illusion, whereas the fire in front of him now was very real. He could clearly feel the terrifying fluctuations coming off of it, and could tell that it was a limit within the world. It was as if the world were using all the power it could to suppress the flame. In fact, the recently conjured 21-colored flame was already beginning to show signs of fading, as though the world around him were trying to extinguish it. There was no time for thought or planning. Without any hesitation, he pulled out his turtle walk, his eyes flashing with both madness and determination. It was only a legend that 21-colored flame could push someone into the diva realm, and it was something that no one had ever done. Bai Xiaochun was the only one throughout all the years who had met the requirements. And now, in the river-defying sect's moment of peril, and in the face of the 21-colored flame teetering on the verge of being extinguished, Bai Xiaochun had no time to ponder what to do. "Time to go for broke," he shouted, a fierce expression twisting his face. Although taking this risk was not something he would normally do, at the moment, he had no choice. The instant the turtle walk was out in the open, his nascent soul flew out into it. At the same time, he waved his hand. The 21-colored flame flew into the walk, fusing into it, causing it to tremble violently. Blinding light erupted out, causing heaven and earth to shake, and forcing incomprehensible levels of spiritual power to converge. It was as if the river-defying sect had become a massive vortex, sucking in all the spiritual power of heaven and earth. The faces of Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Xiaochun fell dramatically, and they flew backward as quickly as possible, ill premonitions filling their hearts. "Dao River, Starry River," shouted Li Shendao, "get over there and bust open his meditation chamber." The hearts of Patriarch Dao River and Patriarch Starry River surged with madness, but they didn't dare to defy the orders they had been given. Seeing that Chen Hichan and Bai Xiaochun weren't offering any other instructions, they gritted their teeth and charged at full speed toward Bai Xiaochun's private chamber. Bruiser howled anxiously, and Patriarch Bloodstream sent the Blood Ancestor forward with him to intercept. Although neither of them were at the diva level, they could at least buy some time. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the two diva patriarchs knocked Bruiser and the Blood Ancestor out of the way, and then closed in on the meditation chamber, toward which the massive quantities of spiritual energy surged. "Open up!" Patriarch Dao River roared, hands flashing in a double-handed incantation gesture that sent tens of thousands of beams of sword light out to form the shape of an enormous great sword. As the sword slashed down toward the meditation chamber, shocking energy filled the area. Patriarch Starry River also went all out to unleash a similarly devastating attack. Starry meteorite subjugation. Ear-splitting rumbling sounds filled the air, along with enraged shouts from countless river-defying sect cultivators, as countless meteorites materialized around Patriarch Starry River and then began to rain down toward Bai Xiaochun's secluded meditation facilities. All of this takes a bit of time to describe, but actually happened in the shortest of moments. In the blink of an eye, the meteorites fell, and the sword slashed down, causing the river-defying sect to shake violently. The mountains that contained Bai Xiaochun's meditation chamber shattered, sending rocks and rubble flying out in all directions before transforming into ash. Even the meditation chamber itself was destroyed. "Xiaochun!" Song Junwan cried. Even as Bruiser howled, Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Xiaochun all shot down into the river-defying sect. However, a moment later, their faces flickered with wild emotion. The will of a diva, that only happens when someone rises to the diva level and fuses with the heavens. Bai Xiaochun actually wasn't a diva before? How is this even possible? Crying out in alarm, all three of them fell back rapidly. And yet, even as they did, a shocking will erupted out from the rubble of the recently destroyed meditation chamber. It was so powerful that as it merged with the heavens, the sky trembled. All previous ripples, all peals of thunder, all of the clouds, were instantly suppressed. The will of Chen Hichan and the other devas, which had previously locked the area down, were instantly driven away. Only one will was left, a domineering will that demanded that the wills of all other devas retreat. An enormous face materialized in the sky, a face with eyes closed, a face that filled all of the heavens, a face which caused the hearts of everyone in the river-defying sect to tremble with unbridled excitement. It was Bai Xiaochun. Chen Hichan, Li Shendao, Bai Xiaochun, Patriarch Dao River, and Patriarch Starry River all looked grim and even sick as they retreated. As for the latter two, they felt a sensation of impending death that surpassed anything they had felt in their previous encounter with Bai Xiaochun. It was in that moment that the eyes of the enormous face in the sky opened. The eyes locked onto Patriarch Dao River's nascent divinity, simultaneously causing all color in the world to dim. Wind screamed and lightning danced, all of which coalesced into a shocking voice. Be destroyed. The face of Bai Xiaochun twisted, transforming into a beam of light that shot toward Patriarch Dao River. It moved so quickly that Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen couldn't even react. To the shock of Patriarch Dao River, before he could even plead for mercy, that beam of light stabbed through his nascent divinity. The beam of light that had been Bai Xiaochun's face moved with indescribable speed, more quickly than anything the disciples of the river-defying sect had ever seen. Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen were all shocked to the core. Not even they had ever seen anything like it. The bright beam of light shot down and stabbed through Patriarch Dao River's nascent divinity before he could even react. He shivered, and his eyes went wide with disbelief as he looked down at his own chest. As he did, a huge boom rang out, and his nascent divinity form exploded into absolutely nothing. He had been killed in the blink of an eye. The entire battlefield went deathly silent. The river-defying sect, Chen Hichan and the Devas, and everyone else was looking at the spot where Patriarch Dao River had been killed. Waves of shock filled everyone present. It was at this point that everyone realized that, right behind where Patriarch Dao River had previously existed, a person was materializing. He had long hair and fair skin, and wore a simple robe. He seemed noble and magnificent, and yet, his eyes were as sharp as the sharpest of swords. He was none other than Bai Xiaochun. Impossible, Chen Hichan gasped. Bai Zhenchen and Li Shendao felt as though their minds were being struck by lightning, and their faces fell dramatically in the face of the power on display by Bai Xiaochun. This, Bai Zhengtian gasped. Even if Dao River was only in nascent divinity form, he should have been able to evade that blow. Such speed, how is it even possible? He wasn't a diva before, Li Shendao murmured, but he most certainly is now. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had previously not been a diva meant that it was as a half-diva that he had injured one diva patriarch, crippled another, and killed the last. It was simply terrifying. The horrifying significance of it all left Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen completely aghast. Patriarch Starry River was shaking violently, his shock surpassed that of Chen Hichan and the others. After all, this was his second time seeing Bai Xiaochun kill a diva. In fact, this time, it went even more smoothly than last time. The mere thought of what he had just seen struck him deeply with fear, and caused him to flee as quickly as possible. The last scrap of courage he had possessed was now gone, and if he had his way, he would never again do anything to provoke Bai Xiaochun. Even as everyone present reeled in shock, Bai Xiaochun reached out and made a grasping motion in the direction of where Patriarch Dao River had been killed. As he did, it was to the utter amazement of all onlookers that a soul shadow appeared. It had a blank look in its eyes, and clearly resembled Patriarch Dao River. As it appeared, it began to float up, as if it were about to merge into some unseen vortex. After all, when souls died in the lands of Heavenspan, they would be taken away into the cycle of reincarnation. However, before the soul of Patriarch Dao River could float up into the heavens, Bai Xiaochun grabbed it. Although no one else present was capable of seeing it, Bai Xiaochun could see that there really was a vortex up above. And in the moment that he reached out to grab the Patriarch's soul, the vortex vanished, as though it had no intention of interfering with his attempt to grab the diva soul. As soon as he had it in his hand, he closed his fingers down, causing a yellow crystal to appear. Sealed within that crystal was none other than an Earth-type diva soul. The cultivators of the river-defying sect were both shaken and excited. Patriarch Spirit Stream was bubbling over with joy, and Patriarch Bloodstream's eyes shone with unprecedented madness. Patriarch Bai! Patriarch Bai! The cries of joy which rang out from the river-defying sect seemed loud enough to fill all of the eastern middle reaches. Bruiser howled in delight at how incredibly powerful Bai Xiaochun had become. Patriarch Spirit Stream and Patriarch Bloodstream, the patriarchs from the other two divisions, Li Qinghao and Zheng Yuandong, were all beside themselves with joy. The river-defying sect finally has a diva. All of the powerful experts in the sect were virtually jumping with delight. Although they had been shocked by Bai Xiaochun's previous level of power, back then, he hadn't been a diva. Although most people in the sect hadn't been aware of that fact, Patriarch Spirit Stream had. He hadn't been a diva, but possessed the battle prowess of one. And yet, the leadership of the sect still hadn't been able to rest easy. But now, powerful fluctuations filled heaven and earth as Bai Xiaochun's will surpassed the will of the heavens. Because of that, Patriarch Spirit Stream and the others knew that Bai Xiaochun was now a diva. The river-defying sect cultivators were beside themselves. As for Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen, as well as Patriarch Starry River, the fact that Bai Xiaochun had just harvested a diva soul filled them with such profound shock that their minds went blank. Impossible. Chen Hichan breathed. Bai Xiaochun and Li Shundao gasped in astonishment. All three of the devas were filled with fright and terror that defied description. What Bai Xiaochun had just done struck them to the deepest level. After all, the only type of person who qualified to both kill a diva and then prevent that person's soul from entering the cycle of reincarnation was a demigod. Neither Chen Hichan, Li Shundao nor Bai Xiaochun could accomplish such a thing. And yet, Bai Xiaochun had done it right in front of them. It was almost impossible to describe the levels of shock and fear they felt as a result. Astonishingly, Bai Xiaochun seemed to possess energy that could force heaven and earth to capitulate to his desires. The truth was that, to most other devas, it would be completely impossible for them to prevent a diva soul from entering the reincarnation cycle of heaven and earth. But to Bai Xiaochun, it took almost no effort. After all, the cycle of reincarnation was part of the underworld river, and his apprentice was the reigning Hell Emperor. If he wanted a diva soul, how could the underworld river possibly vie with him for it? Although no one was able to tell, not even Chen Hichan and the other devas, from the way that Bai Xiaochun had attacked and killed Patriarch Dao River, it was clear that he was a rare Heaven Dao diva. Furthermore, he had broken through using heavenly multicolored flame to perform a 21-fold spirit enhancement on his nascent soul. Because of that, all early diva realm cultivators were beyond weak when compared to him. Even mid-diva realm experts could be put in their place by him. Perhaps he couldn't be considered the most powerful among all devas, but he was on that path. Throughout all the years which had passed, the only other person to become a Heaven Dao diva was Taoist Heavenspan, who was also known as the Celestial. Now, Bai Xiaochun was the second. However, Bai Xiaochun had done something that the Celestial had not. He had performed a 21-fold spirit enhancement on his nascent soul using the peak level of flame that could exist in the world. That made Bai Xiaochun the ultimate type of diva. He was the only person in all of history to do such a thing. Some of it was coincidence, and some of it was because of Bai Xiaochun's hard work. All of it came together into something beyond belief. In fact, it had been somewhat of a gamble on his part. He hadn't been completely confident that a 21-colored flame would make him a diva. After sensing Bai Xiaochun's energy, Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Xiaochun exchanged glances and then retreated en masse, leaving Patriarch Starry River conspicuously out in the open. Terrified, Patriarch Starry River made to retreat, simultaneously rejoicing that Bai Xiaochun had chosen to strike down Patriarch Dao River and not himself. However, even as the four devas began to back away, Bai Xiaochun turned his head, and his eyes flashed like lightning. "You trespassed on the river-defying sect. Do you really think you can leave without offering compensation?" The coldness and rage in his voice couldn't have been more apparent. The river-defying sect had just been in the deadliest of crises, and everyone knew that if he hadn't become a diva, the results would have been unimaginable. As soon as Bai Xiaochun's words echoed out, the eyes of Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Xiaochun flickered. The three of them hadn't actually communicated about what to do, they had just fled as quickly as possible. Their departure made Patriarch Starry River even more conspicuous, placing him right in between them and Bai Xiaochun. To Bai Xiaochun, it seemed like they were putting Patriarch Starry River out as bait, to lure him out, see how strong he actually was, and then decide whether or not to join forces against him. After all, they were all still members of the same sect. Because of their status and position within the sect, they wouldn't pick a fight that they weren't certain in being able to win. Patriarch Starry River could also see what was happening, although that realization did him little good. All he could do was bite his tongue, spit out some blood, and draw upon a secret magic to try to flee. All of this takes a bit of time to describe, but actually happened in the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint. Without the slightest hesitation, Bai Xiaochun sprang into motion. He had keen intuition when it came to battle, and therefore, he headed directly toward the isolated Patriarch Starry River. "Let's see who's faster, you people, or me." Eyes flashing, he accelerated with blinding speed. The instant Bai Xiaochun sped into motion, Patriarch Starry River let out a desolate shriek and tried to speed up. At the same time, Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Xiaochun looked on with coldly flashing eyes. "Turns out he really is too young and inexperienced," Chen Hichan said with a cold snort. "Far too impulsive." He quickly performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing red light to spring up around him, which rapidly became an enormous blood-colored fist. The 300-meter fist was surrounded by a madly spinning wind of blood-colored devastation. Countless vicious faces floated inside of it, shrieking madly as endless quantities of the spiritual power of heaven and earth poured into it. In the blink of an eye, the fist became almost completely corporeal, and was bearing down directly onto Bai Xiaochun. The air shattered around it, and a reek of blood filled the area, tugging at the chi and blood of everyone in the river-defying sect. Blood Fiend Fist. Patriarch Bloodstream gasped. This was one of the trump cards at the disposal of Chen Hichan, something that, despite not being eternally indestructible, was very close to that level. In fact, once it was unleashed, it grew more powerful with every moment that passed. The instant that Chen Hichan made his move, Bai Xiaochun performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing a black horn to sprout out from his forehead. As it did, a black beam of electric light shot out, and grew larger with each moment. The black light caused wild colors to flash in heaven and earth. Simultaneously, numerous lightning bolts formed overhead, becoming something like a huge net that shot down toward Bai Xiaochun. As the net descended, it caused the air to vibrate with astonishing sealing power. Numerous eyes were visible within the net, all of them as black as night. Furthermore, the net absorbed all of the surrounding lightning, causing it to split into 10 duplicate layers, then 100, then 1000. Eventually, it had over 10,000 layers. This was a trump card belonging to Bai Xiaochun, and was something he could only unleash with difficulty. However, considering how shocked he had been by Bai Xiaochun earlier, he knew he had to attack with his most deadly move. Things weren't over yet. Last was Li Shundao. Eyes shining with strange light, he opened his mouth and spat out a beam of white light, which grew larger and larger until it materialized into an enormous chessboard. The illusory chessboard seemed to fill all creation. It was as if the heavens were the chess players, the earth was the chessboard, and the magical power of Li Shundao were the chess pieces. Towering figures appeared within the cosmic chessboard, celestial soldiers and generals clad in shocking armor. There were 5 celestial soldiers on the front line, 2 muscular warriors behind them, and in the rear, numerous courtly officials, warhorses, and bloodthirsty foot soldiers, all protecting the person in the very center, the Heaven Master. 1. In the blink of an eye, the 3 devas unleashed supreme, destructive power that threatened to overwhelm both Bai Xiaochun and Patriarch Starry River. Patriarch Starry River's eyes were bloodshot, and he was breathing heavily. He knew that he couldn't retreat now. If he did, he might escape death, but would surely incur the wrath of Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Xiaochun. He had no options to choose from. Spinning in place, he decided to stall Bai Xiaochun in the hopes that the divine abilities of the 3 other devas would kill him in time. Everything was happening very quickly. Bai Xiaochun sprang into motion, and the divine abilities closed in on him. However, he didn't back down. Instead, he accelerated. As he moved, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing countless rocks and rubble in the area to fly toward him, clumping around him until he was a towering stone golem. This was the living mountain incantation backed by a diva cultivation base. As soon as his stone golem took shape, the net of lightning approached. And yet, despite how much destructive power was in the net, Bai Xiaochun was moving too quickly. His stone golem form was damaged, but he evaded most of the attack and closed in on Patriarch Starry River. Without the slightest hesitation, he utilized the mountain shaking bash. The mountain shaking bash increased Bai Xiaochun's speed dramatically. He evaded the cosmic chessboard, dashing through the 5 celestial soldiers, and appearing right in front of Patriarch Starry River. Even as the Patriarch let out a bellow of shock, Bai Xiaochun bashed into him. A whump sound echoed out, accompanied by boundless ripples. Blood sprayed out of Patriarch Starry River's mouth as he was shoved backward. At the same time, Chen Hichan's trump card arrived, the enormous blood-colored fist. As Patriarch Starry River fell back, Bai Xiaochun lunged forward, his enormous stone hand reaching out, black light shining off of the thumb and forefinger. It was none other than the throat-crushing grasp. A deafening boom rang out as Bai Xiaochun's throat-crushing grasp latched onto Patriarch Starry River. A strangled scream could be heard as the Patriarch's fleshly body was torn to pieces, and his nascent divinity flew out into the open, expression that of terror and despair. Ignoring any thoughts of cooperating with Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Xiaochun, he fled. That was when Chen Hichan's enormous, blood-colored fist arrived, preventing Bai Xiaochun from chasing after Patriarch Starry River. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flashed. Even the slightest pause in his part would allow the 3 devas' divine abilities and magical techniques to land on him. And yet, he didn't hesitate at all to perform an incantation gesture, sending frigid chi erupting out in all directions. 9 frigid projections appeared, which flanked Bai Xiaochun in a phalanx position as he shot forward toward the blood-colored fist. When the 9 frigid projections met the fist, they shattered with a boom. However, the blood-colored fist also lurched to a halt. That brief pause was all Bai Xiaochun needed. He immediately stepped forward, utilizing the undying hex. The stone golem form crumbled as he passed through the enormous net, across the battlefield, to appear right in front of the Patriarch Starry River's fleeing nascent divinity. In exactly the same way that he had cut down Patriarch Dao River, he became a beam of light that slashed all the way through Patriarch Starry River's nascent divinity. A miserable scream rang out as Patriarch Starry River's nascent divinity collapsed into pieces. 1. The chessboard described here is a Chinese chessboard, which is different from the standard international chessboard many of you are probably familiar with. The description of 5 men in the front, 2 behind them, and then a larger group further behind perfectly matches the opening layout of a Chinese chessboard. Check out what I mean by clicking here. Chinese chess is extremely popular in China. If you want to learn more about it, check here. This was the 3rd diva cultivator Bai Xiaochun had killed in his life. Each kill happened more smoothly than the last, and struck more fear into the hearts of those who looked on. Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Zhenchen had tossed out bait, but Bai Xiaochun had acted with incomparable decisiveness, disregarding the divine abilities they had sent against him to strike down Patriarch Starry River. The 3 remaining devas were shocked to the core. However, all of them were veterans of many battles, and therefore, it was without the slightest hesitation that they poured even more power into their divine abilities and magical techniques. The innumerable vicious faces that made up Chen Hichan's blood-colored fist shrieked ferociously as the fist grew larger and larger. The lightning net of 10,000 layers sliced through the air as it shot toward Bai Xiaochun, locking down all avenues of escape. And the cosmic chessboard grew more corporeal than ever. The celestial soldiers and generals attacked with mountain-toppling, sea-draining force. Bai Xiaochun was being assaulted with deadly force on all fronts and from all directions. The 3 devas had to admit that they had been careless earlier. Never could they have imagined that, before, Bai Xiaochun wasn't actually a diva, their carelessness would lead to both Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Dao River perishing. It was a heavy blow to their self-confidence. Having reached this point in the battle, they felt they had no choice other than to push things to the extreme. If they killed Bai Xiaochun in the process, then at worst, they would lose some prestige in the process of explaining away the situation. If they didn't come out on top, then not only would they have lost their diva subordinates, but they would also lose massive amounts of face, not to mention that they would have to deal with the future ramifications of having Bai Xiaochun alive and well in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. After all, if they came out on the bottom, Patriarch Steel Veins would surely use that fact to his advantage. Damn it, if we'd known this guy would be so hard to deal with, we wouldn't have come. However, if you ride a tiger, it's hard to get off. Therefore, Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Zhenchen had no choice but to grit their teeth and intensify the power of their attacks. Since they had already committed some offenses, then they absolutely had to kill this opponent of theirs. That was the only way to resolve the situation. Deafening booms filled heaven and earth as Bai Xiaochun turned in place. There was no time for him to harvest Patriarch Starry River's soul in the face of this deadly attack. Although he was a Heaven Dao Diva, his opponents were 3 cultivators in the mid-diva realm. There was no room for carelessness. A stern and awe-inspiring gleam could be seen in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. As of this moment, he wasn't thinking about his actions at all. He was acting on pure instinct. He took a step forward, waving his hand to summon frigid chi, and within it, 9 frigid projections. When the 9 projections collided with the divine abilities of Chen Hichan, Li Shundao and Bai Zhenchen, they collapsed. And yet, cracks appeared on the blood-colored fist, the lightning net began to unravel, and the cosmic chessboard began to fall apart. That wasn't enough to stop the attacks moving against him, and yet, it had slowed them down, giving Bai Xiaochun time for his next move. Blurring into motion, he performed another incantation gesture with both hands, causing diva power to erupt out. Violet Chi Cauldron summoning, he shouted. Instantly, violet light filled the sky as a gigantic violet cauldron appeared. In the blink of an eye, it transformed from illusory into corporeal. The truth was that it wasn't actually a violet cauldron. It was more than 100 cauldrons, overlapping to create a glowing violet shield. The instant the shield formed, Chen Hichan's blood-colored fist arrived, along with the lightning net and the chessboard. Boom! Bai Xiaochun shivered as his 100 violet cauldrons collapsed one by one, causing intense fluctuations to roll out in waves. As he fell back, he resorted to the living mountain incantation, as well as 9 more frigid projections. More cracks than ever covered the surface of Chen Hichan's blood-colored fist, and one of the fingers was already collapsing into pieces. The lightning net was in similarly bad shape, and had only about 7,000 layers left. As for the cosmic chessboard, the 5 celestial soldiers were almost completely destroyed, and the heavenly generals were close behind. However, the 3 divine abilities looked just as impressive to anyone observing the fight from the outside, and seemed to be on the verge of wiping Bai Xiaochun out of existence. Before he had become a diva, he wouldn't have been able to hold out, not even by drawing upon every last technique he was capable of. Even his undying Emperor's fist wouldn't have been enough to save him. But now, things were different. Eyes flashing with strange light, he threw his hands first up, and then down. Water Swamp Kingdom, a howl as if from another world erupted out, filling all creation. At the same time, water vapor roiled about, filling everything in sight. The area involved was vastly larger than anything which had been seen before when the Water Swamp Kingdom was unleashed. The sky went dim, and winds screamed as curved mountains rose up. The mountains soon became claws, which grew larger and larger, until an enormous hand was visible. The scaled, pitch-black hand descended toward the divine abilities of Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Xiaochun, smashing into them, and causing the devas' faces to fall. "What is this?" they shouted in alarm. Before they could react, the huge clawed hand smashed into the divine abilities. 3 more fingers on the blood-colored fist were destroyed, leaving behind only a single finger. Even the palm was completely shattered. Massive ripping and tearing sounds could be heard from the 7,000 layers of the lightning net as almost all of them were destroyed. Only 2,000 remained. Nearly 80% of the troops atop the chessboard were transformed into ash, and the chessboard itself was badly damaged. Although all of this takes a bit of time to describe, it happened with incredible abruptness. In the blink of an eye, the clawed hand was gone, and the 3 divine abilities were drastically reduced. Although none of them had been completely destroyed, they were significantly weakened, and as they bore down on Bai Xiaochun, he didn't do anything to evade them. Instead, he reached out with his right hand. A massive wind erupted out, slamming into the remaining finger from the blood-colored fist. When that happened, a tremor passed through Bai Xiaochun. Then the wind touched the lightning net, and he breathed in heavily and took a step back. Lastly, he looked up as the wind smashed into the chessboard and its forces. Massive booms could be heard as the fist collapsed, the net shattered, and the chessboard exploded. Blood oozed out of the corners of Bai Xiaochun's mouth as he staggered backward several steps. However, he wasn't significantly injured. He had mastered the undying bones, and as such, his eyes shone radiantly. His energy surged, causing all creation to tremble as an enormous, illusory version of his face appeared up above, and looked down menacingly at Chen Hichan, Li Shendao and Bai Xiaochun. "That's all you've got? Alright, now it's my turn." Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.